Hi, everyone. Welcome to an episode of AQS Quilt Stars. I am just delighted to be here with you again today and to introduce one of my friends, a dear friend to AQS. Her name is Ann Hazelwood. She's a renowned author of quilt fiction that you have likely seen or heard about or even read. And we're just so happy to be here together. Today, we are being sponsored by C&T Publishing. Now, C&T Publishing has taken over all of your books, Ann, and they've just done a wonderful job with marketing them so far. C&T, thank you for sponsoring this program. And if you're out there watching, be sure to stick around. About halfway through this episode, we're going to tell you how you can be entered to win a $200 gift certificate from C&T Publishing, which would be a great way to stock up
Wow,
on your Ann Hazelwood books.
that sounds great.
So,
Thank you, Liz, for having me. And thank you, C&T, for making this possible because, as you know, that's where I started my fiction writing was with the AQS family. And I was very fortunate in how successful they have become. And to be able to continue with these folks is, I feel very blessed. And so, yeah, things are going well and we're staying on schedule pretty much. And so I'm excited to share all that with you today. And so, what can I
wonderful.
tell you?
Well, I'm just excited to talk and learn more about it. And we've got a lot of the books here, probably all the books here. I've got them on my shelf in my office, and so I've gotten to look through some of them. And I know that they're just beloved by quilters all over. Whenever we had you at our shows signing books in the AQS booth, it was like madness. People were so
Crazy.
excited to get their
Yes.
hands on them. So
Yeah.
yeah, so let's learn more. Just first of all, we were talking before this that weirdly enough, a lot of my background is in literature and reading. I've always loved reading, and so I'd like to know where your passion came for writing and how you got started.
As a very young child, honestly, I was always writing. For me, I needed pencil and paper. I love the big cheap tablets. I would make my own books so that I could play school. I don't know what I was writing, but I was always writing. And so I always worried, do I have enough paper? I would scrounge paper, blank paper, everywhere I could get. And so I've kind of always been that way. So I've been writing everything from poetry to short stories to you name it. And of course, when I started my business, I did a 12-page tabloid where I could write my own articles and write about things I wanted to. I wrote the neighborhood newsletter, the South Main Star. And I was always writing in whatever capacity I was in. And it's just the way that I've always communicated. And so when sold my business a good 10 years ago, the fiction portion of my life really took off. Prior to that, I was writing Missouri travel books because I was in the tourist industry basically. I had 3 stores in a historic area. I was telling people every day where to go, what to do, what to eat, all that sort of thing. And I thought, I need to have some better communication about all this. So I started writing travel books for Reedy Press. I did about 5 or 6 of them, and but they were limited because it was truly just about Missouri. So when I was offered the opportunity with AQS to start writing fiction, I discovered a great deal of fun because I could use all my experience in what I had done all my life, and whether it was characters, circumstances, challenges, whatever it was, I could work them into my storyline. So I started out with the Colbridge series, which is a 7 series uh, um, fiction series, and it takes place in St. Charles, Missouri, which is where I live. And I was able to use my retail experience. And so the main character actually has a flower shop on Main Street. And so what you will be reading is basically things that really were happening, the challenges, the characters, the events, all those things were pretty much true. I had to make up very little. So that was really, really successful. The next series was the East Perry County series, and that's an area that I'm from. it's a lot of little German towns and beautiful rolling hills. And I was able to share those wonderful stories about the church lady quilts, about the wonderful food, and all kinds of things that only they would be known for. And from there, I went to the Wine Country series. The Wine Country here in Missouri is quite interesting, quite beautiful, and is now going through a renovation to compete with Napa Valley. It is that wonderful. So I had been going there a lot, got to know the people. I was buying quilts from Carrie Mae Wilson, who's a character in the book. I would buy some of her antique quilts and resell them in my store. And so I got to know a lot of the characters. Some of the people came to quilt clubs that we had at the store. And so I really had a taste for what the area was like and the challenges that they were going through and the growth that was happening. So Lily, the main character in that series, was a red and white quilt collector. And because I'm a red and white quilt collector, as well as everything else red and white, I had a lot of fun writing about her because she could explain the thinking, why she was buying what she was buying. And so it was a wonderful way to share my red and white experience. And so from there, however, we went to our fourth series, which I'm currently writing, and it's from Door County, Wisconsin. Now, every time I say to someone, have you been to Door County? They go, "Oh, I love Door County." It's not just, yeah, I've been there. No, it's, I love Door County. And that's the way I felt. And after going 21 years with my husband, I got to meet a lot of people, do a lot of things, see a lot of things. And so I thought, this is an area I could truly write about. So I did. I began that journey, and it's getting a wonderful response. So we're a couple of books into it. The next one won't be out till in October. And there will be 5 books to that series as well. And the first book, which I want to show you, is really an introduction. It's almost like a travelogue. That's what people are telling me. If you read the first book called Quilters of the Door, it will be, you will be just coming along with me as you enter Door County, and you will learn a lot. Now, I call it Quilters of the Door because it's basically about 8 quilters who are quite diverse. They belong to a very discreet quilt club that doesn't allow any new members, and they're very strict about what they do. Well, my character, Claire, comes along, and she gets to be a member of that club because someone else moved away, and it's a long story, but they moved away, and she was able to take her spot. Well, things were never the same in the club since.
I can
And
only imagine.
yeah. And so she basically really upsets the apple cart, and that kind of continues through the series. So
Well, I just wanted to pause for a moment and say, I think part of what makes your story so successful and so enticing to your readers is just like you said, it's almost like a travelogue in addition to the story itself. So when you're reading about these stories about Lily Girl and about Claire and about your other characters, you're also experiencing life in these beautiful, picturesque areas that we all feel, at least for me, you feel at peace and you feel quaint, like it's simpler than a little bit than what we're living right now. And it's just such a good way to escape into these other people's lives, but also these other locations and sort of see them through the eyes of the book.
exactly, and it gives readers a real chance of belonging to something. So
Yes.
many people are lonely out there, especially during the pandemic. And if they have a sense of family and they get to care for your characters, which seem to be my strong points, they truly want to know what's going to happen. And that's why every 6 months just isn't quite often enough to
Yes.
give them a new book.
Yes.
But I hear wonderful, wonderful stories. And I just can't believe sometimes they become that real to people
Mhm.
that they do.
But they do. When we're invested in a story like that, especially like you said, when so many of us have felt isolated or not been able to travel and see those places in real life, it's the perfect way to be in the safety and the comfort of your home, but also explore these areas and meet these new people. And, characters, there are many characters in my life and stories I've read that are dear to me still.
That to stay with you.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Well, I was so determined not to put the pandemic in this series I was writing because I needed the escape,
That's
and
right.
and my readers certainly needed the escape.
Yeah.
So it was difficult because I'd be writing about an event, and then I think, oh, I can't do that, or should I do that? It was almost like I almost had to wear a mask while I was writing.
Oh, bless your heart.
So, so anyway, got through that. Thank goodness we got through that. And so now, yeah, we're moving on to what's happening in Claire's life in Door County.
Well, wonderful. I know everyone's going to be so excited to read about that and to experience the setting and the story and about how she's sort of upended that very elite quilt group there in Door County. Can
Exactly. And Door County is very much known as an art community. I mean, it's a peninsula, but it is artists. I mean, it started out to be almost all artists, and that's kind of the way it is today. And so Claire is a watercolor artist. She's the main character. So she's perfect in this environment. Um, so you get to hear a little bit about that world as well. She does quilt. She is involved in quilting, but the art world alone is very interesting to follow in how they survive and make a living in that area.
Oh, absolutely. I imagine it is. My husband is an artist, so we know about
Mhm.
about that kind of thing. Now, let me
Yeah.
ask you. I'm glad you brought it up because quilts, and especially those quilts that we're seeing, we see in shows or we see just the people are making and sharing with us. They're not they are things that you put on your bed and that are comforting items, but they're not just that. It's a work of art. It's American folk art. And so we see just the most incredible pieces of art. And so it'd be nice to kind of read about that connection. But I want to ask you, I know you've appraised quilts for AQS. You've got a history with quilts. And so how when did your interest in quilts start, and how did it inspire you to create stories that revolve around them?
Well, you can talk to any quilter and get a story. I
That's
mean,
right.
every quilter's got a story, believe me. Now, I also had a button shop, and you talk about stories. Everybody has a button jar and a story. So it all is kind of the same. But my mother was a quilter. She only lived till I was 16, but I always had a love for quilts. But when I started quilt making in the 70s, in fact, 1970 is when I made my first quilt. Um, that was not too cool to be a young girl making old lady quilts. I had long braids. I was sort of a beatnik.
Hmm.
And so I had a tendency to make kind of unusual things like patchwork shawls and skirts and things that were kind of whimsical instead of the traditional quilts.
Hmm.
So that's how I found my place in quilting. I also love the fact that I didn't have to follow the rules with quilting. I could do my own thing. If you make a dress, you better follow those directions or
That's
you don't have a
absolutely right.
dress.
That's right.
But with a quilt, sort of anything goes. Now, it took me a while to get rid of the quilt police, but I loved quilting in that it truly is a wonderful self expression about what you like and what you want to do. And so, being in retail with quilts, I had my quilt store 30 years. I'd heard a lot of stories. I met a lot of quilters. So I knew the different things and ways it was affecting people's lives. So there was always something to talk about. And when you go to quilt shows like the AQS in Houston, you don't meet a stranger.
That's
You
right.
have quilting in common. I mean, there is no stranger. You can speak to anyone. It's such a wonderful, wonderful community.
That's right.
Really
We
is.
love the quilting community. And during this time, we're so excited to be getting back to shows in 22. But during this
Oh,
time in the shutdown,
absolutely.
just finding a way to connect with that quilting community through things like this has just
Right.
been so nice because it really is the community that supports all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, let me ask you about the quilt that's behind you.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Well, I'm a polka dot girl. If you know my history with the red and white quilts, polka dots go with red and white. That's all there is to it. In fact, I pulled this book out in 2003. I wrote this pretty polka dot book, and I even write the history of polka dots, which nobody thinks there would be, but there is the history of polka dots. And so I was collecting anything polka dots. And when I saw this quilt, I believe it was in a antique store in Illinois somewhere. It was all wadded up in a basket. And all I could see was a little red peeking out. And I screamed so loud that everybody in the mall, antique mall, had to come and see what I found. And I found this polka dot quilt. Through the years, I've learned this is not real unique. It actually was a pattern in the 1930s. I don't know if it was called anything, but it is actually, you probably can't see it on the camera, but it's applique circles and then a feather quilting around the circle and beautiful quilting. So it probably was made about the 30s, unlike most red and white quilts, or like 1880, 1880 to say 1910. This is probably a little later. It was in my polka dot book, which is out of print, unfortunately. People really would love to have that back. Um, so that's that. But I have so many. In fact, this quilt here
Oh, wow.
is unusual in that it's a red and white applique quilt. And with all my quilts, I have very few that are applique, because usually appliques are in, pastels and flowers and things like that. But this is applique on top of applique, and the maker is Carol Armstrong, who I believe used to write for C&T many, many years ago. She had wonderful applique books. And so she made this for us, and I kept it from the store. And then I have much bigger quilts with a lot of applique. And each block is a different applique motif, and just one cuter than the other. And this quilt was made because my red work group knew I was doing the polka dot book, and they knew I'd be traveling to lecture on it. So they each made a different block using the same applique fabric,
Oh, okay.
polka dot fabric. So it's consistent through the quilt. So I can just go on and on
Well,
about my collection.
yeah. Well, and I know I don't even have to ask you what your favorite color is because I can
Right.
tell. But those two color quilts are so lovely and I love seeing them. And you must have just created a really wonderful collection over the years. And before we look at more, I want to pause really quickly and say C&T is again our sponsor for this program, and we're so excited that they are distributing your books and that they are publishing
Right.
your new series. And if we
Right.
want to hear a message from them, they're going to do a giveaway for a $200 gift certificate for C&T for anyone who's watching. Be sure to enter that. And if you stay tuned for just a moment, you can see how to do that. Thank you, C&T Publishing, for that message. We're so happy to have you here as our sponsor for Quilting Stars. And don't forget, if you're watching this, you have a chance to enter to win a $200 gift certificate for C&T Publishing. You can do that by reading the description below. Now, Anne, I want to get back to talking about your book series. Your new series, the Door County Quilts, is based in Door County, Wisconsin. And can you tell us a little bit about your most recent book?
This came out in the fall, and it's a wonderful story about Claire's adventure into educating the Door community about quilts, because she sees all this art, but she doesn't see a lot of exposure for quilts. So she decides that the best way to do this is to have an outdoor quilt show, a free outdoor quilt show. And I did the same thing when I was a shop owner. I had a show called Main Street Quilts. Um, Quilts on Main is actually the title of it. And so every year we hung 400 quilts on the building of
Oh,
Main Street. And
wow.
so it was a long strip where you could just drive down to see it. We didn't close the street. And it was a wonderful opportunity for people who were handicapped or too old or whatever, that they could just drive down the street and see beautiful quilts. And we did that for about 5 or 6 years, but so much work. And to the point I was trying to run a business and do this show that I had to let it go. But it was a wonderful PR event. It's a very risky event.
So risky. You're talking
Oh,
to a quilt show planner, and so thinking about doing one
oh, I mean,
outdoors
an
is just, yeah,
outdoor.
yeah.
So I went to Sisters, Oregon, and they gave me wonderful advice on their outdoor quilt show. So I knew a lot of things that had to be taken care of. And so we had it down to a science. So we knew exactly what quilt was going where with a photograph, with the equipment. The same bag it came out of, went back in the same bag, back to the thing. It was just a wonderful system. So fortunately, in this series, I tell about all those steps. So it's great for like quilt gills to read in case they ever want to do it. But it ends up being very successful because it's never been done in Door County. And basically, what she's doing is an art show. It's
Yeah,
just with quilts and it's outdoors.
that's right.
So yeah, so it ends up to be quite successful. Even though there are challenges, there has to be a little drama in these books.
Oh,
So
obviously.
yeah, so we managed to get through that. But the next book is called the Tannenbaum Christmas Quilt, and it's a Christmas book that'll be out in October. And it is about this wonderful Christmas quilt that has a Christmas tree on it. A German girl, it belongs to this German girl, and she calls it her Tannenbaum quilt. So that has a wonderful story to it. And of course, there's a Christmas tree farm that's ongoing through the series. And who doesn't love a Christmas tree farm?
I
I mean,
know.
if you watch Hallmark, you've got to have a Christmas tree farm.
I was just about to say this sounds like a future
Yes,
Hallmark movie.
it's very Hallmarkish.
Mm-hmm.
And so that will be the next book that will be out. And so and then two more following that. So I'm always writing uh, a good series ahead, which, you really have to.
Yeah, that makes
You have to
sense.
really discipline yourself to being way ahead. And so that takes, some concentration and so forth. And I'm not a good sleeper. Um, there's very little time to do that. But on the other hand, it's a great time to be quiet and to think, okay, what's going to be happening to these people? And
Right. I mean,
sometimes it's good and bad.
you're almost spending your life in two different worlds.
I am. I say
So,
that to my husband all the
oh, you
time.
do.
That I have to worry about them. I have to figure out how they're going to get out of this or how their health is going to be. Um, it's really can be stressful, and on the other hand, it can be very fun. When there's a wedding to plan, I have to go into all the details of the wedding. Or if there's a funeral, I have to think of the outcome of that. And so it really can occupy your time day and night.
I can only imagine. Well, you've kind of presented a good segue for us here. Can you tell us sort of about your writing process and how you said that you work far ahead and that you're thinking about the stories all the time? When you actually sit down to write, I mean, what's your process there?
Okay, I've always been a writer by hand, of course, before we had the advanced social media or electronics or what have you. But I always was a hand writer because I started so young. So, in a sense, I almost am writing the book twice. I used to do a rough outline of chapters before it went into the laptop. But now I find myself doing practically all the details in hand first. Now, what's good about that, it's time consuming, but what's good about it is by the time it goes into the computer, I get a chance to rewrite and rethink like, okay, I want to say this differently. Or no, I'm not going to let that happen. It gives me another perspective, another time to double check what I'm writing about.
Yeah, so by the time it gets in the computer, it's already been through its first edit, so to speak.
It basically what I do is I'm almost writing the book twice because I'm writing everything by hand. I'm a hand writer, always have been, as you can imagine, way back when. That's how we wrote. And so that's what I do before it goes into the computer. And what's good about the process is it gives me a chance to rewrite. Uh, as I'm reading what I just wrote, I can rewrite, I can rethink, redo what actually is put into the computer uh, for the real thing. And of course, it has another chance to change before it's turned over to the editors. But that's kind of my process. And by handwriting, I like to write in different places. I write a lot on my front porch swing. I write in the backyard. I can write on vacation. I can write at various locations where it isn't always so easy to take your laptop and so forth.
Right.
But I admire those folks that can just sit down with their laptop and start writing a story. It's just not my style. It's just not how I've done it. Um,
Well, and by the time you've got it in the computer, you're kind of doing your first edit just by typing and choosing what you're keeping and
exactly.
what you're changing. And so I can sympathize with that. When I would sometimes write much shorter things like poetry, I would always write it by hand.
Oh,
But I
yes.
can't imagine doing the bulk of a novel by hand. That's some true commitment
Well,
there.
to give you a clue, by the time a book is done, which is usually 300 to 400 pages and 90,000 words, I have three big notebooks this thick that are filled
Completely filled.
when the
Wow.
book is done.
Oh my gosh. You know,
Isn't that crazy?
you could give that to somebody to type in. You don't have to do it yourself.
Well, trust me, I'm giving that some thought.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame you at
But
all.
on the other hand, it's kind of my way of fixing and doing it.
Hmm.
But yes, I think it's a wonderful idea.
Well, it's so interesting to know how you go about writing and being able to sit on your front porch or something, especially when you're writing about an area that you're in.
Oh,
When you were set in
exactly.
Missouri, that's just perfect.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
I wanted to touch on something that I was thinking about when you were describing your books, which is that from what I can tell, most of your stories have some sort of quilt group in them or a group of women who, talk about quilting. And I think that's something we try to push a lot here is that if you're a quilter, it's so important to get involved with a quilt guild or just a group of friends or a community. And I know that's what AQS tries to do with our membership, become an AQS member, and then you're part of this whole quilting community. And so
Exactly.
community is important, and I'm glad that you're also telling people about that.
Well, and just think about online and the social media groups that we have just online alone, you can become a part of.
That's
But
right.
yes, in the storylines, they all do have sort of a group of friends. In the Wine Country series, they met at the library. And in the and they also in the Wine Country series, they have a group what is called the Dinner Detectives, and they're trying to solve a lot of problems about a lot of things. But they're all quilters, and basically they get together for dinner and try to solve the problems of what's going on in that house.
Well, that's
So,
perfect. And
but
I encourage all of you watching to get together with a group.
yes,
Now that we can safely do that, get a group together and make it a quilt club, book club, and you can read Anne's books. You've got, and is it 4 series total that you have?
fourth series. I'm in
Four
the fourth
series.
series. Yes,
Yeah, so if
yes.
you haven't started any of them yet, you've got plenty to catch up on, plenty that you can choose from, and you can get those from C&T Publishing. Now I'm going to give you a 1-800 number, and we're also going to put that in our description so you know where to call to get those books. And that is 800-462-6420. And one more time, in case your pen didn't have enough ink or something, 800-462-6420, and you can get those books and be part of the whole enchantment of them.
Thank you, Liz, for this opportunity. I mean, it is so great. And I want to thank my readers that are listening, to let them know how much I appreciate their feedback on what they think about something. I know they worry about some of my characters, and I just want everybody to know everybody's okay. And I'll have a surprise in the last book of this series where I'll let you know how all those folks are doing.
Well, that's good to know. I know everybody is waiting with bated breath, and they'll also be waiting for your new book to come out in October.
Yes, the Tandem Christmas quilt.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Anne, and thank you, C&T Publishing, for sponsoring this episode of AQS Quilting Stars. We've had just a wonderful time chatting today, and coming from Quilt City, USA, I just want to say thanks again, and we'll see you next time.